Hello guys, so welcome to day 17 of your Python training. Um, in today's lesson we're going to be learning about what we call error handling. So why are we exactly trying to teach you guys what we call error handling is the fact that there are some times where you write your computer program and then your program gets to come across some certain type of errors that unforeseen errors, and because of that it kind of stops your program from keep running as you expected it to do. So if you have like 100 lines of code and there's an error in line 30, so your program is just going to run up to line 30 and it's just going to stop, and then the error is going to be displayed. But what do you do to prevent such type of errors in your program, such that you can always revisit and then correct those errors later on? So that's exactly what we are trying to look out here in our today's lesson for error handling. So let's just assume we have a list called my list that contains um, let's say um, numbers and strings 56. Okay, so let's assume we wrongly pronounce my list, and then we want to say print index 2, which is actually string 45. We expected to have a name error because this is not defined, this is defined. So when we run this guy right now and we check our shell, it says my list is not defined. So now you can have a lot of program running, but how do you actually prevent such type of error from interrupting your program? That's why we want to introduce you guys to what we call the try block. So your try block basically contains every information that should that you want your program to run. So always take note of the indentation. So the next thing is, okay, now that this is what your program is running, your try block, I also want to introduce you to the except block, which is what the except block actually runs whenever there's an exception, whenever there's an error popping up here. So that is what your exception block is going to run. You can go ahead and say whenever there's an error here, just do nothing by putting the pass statement, but that won't really help your programming. So the best you can do is to just say do something whenever you have an error. So maybe let me know whenever you have this error, let me know whenever you have that error. So let us say print um, um, an error just occurred, right? So there's just going to be that form of notification. So when we run this program right now, F5, so if you look at our Python shell, it says an error just occurred. That's to show that irrespective of you of printing a bunch of red lines, that you do not want to see in your program, this just gets printed. So whenever there's an error here, this always gets printed. you know um, for you to actually know the type of errors, okay, let me just say you can go ahead to do something like this, whereby you just specify all the type of errors you just want to keep catching, which is like the key error, the index error, um, indentation error, and others. You can just keep um, putting those type of errors. So whatever form of error, whether you put this or not, that doesn't mean to catch the error. It should definitely catch the error, but for more emphasis you can just write it like this, keep adding all the errors, and then it's going to actually or you can just say print error, so the type of error that actually occurred. So okay, I think this should be a name error, so let's just have a name error. So it's as simple as that. So let's it says name, my list is not found. So instead of actually trying to print um, instead of trying to print out all these things, it's going to print out the error, which is the name error. It's just going to print out this, and that's what we have here, name, and then my list is not defined. So this looks much more appropriate. All right, so another thing I also want to introduce you guys to is what we call the else. Now, the else statement, else, E-L-S-E, is a statement of block that gets executed whenever there's no form of error here. So let's just assume we have it written correctly. So we can just say print um, this run because there was no error. So whatever you want to run, whatever program you want to execute, uh, whatever you want to execute, you do not whenever you do not have an error in the program you're trying to test, you can put them in the else statement. So if you run this guy right now, it's going to say for the 5 this ran because there was no error. Okay, so now let's go back to our program. So I believe you guys understand this. So finally, this part ran, so there was no error here. So it printed out for the 5 and I also printed out this, and this didn't run because there was no error detected. So the last thing I also want to talk about is the finally. The finally, this is the kind of block like the try, the except, and the else. This will always get executed if there is no form of, this will always get executed whether there's an error or there's no error. So you just print this always executes, right? All right, so print F5. So when we go to our Python shell, it says for the 5 this run because there's no error, this always executes. Okay, so what am I trying to say exactly is that the final statement always executes irrespective of whether there's an error or not. So because there was no error, this too ran. So let's try and see if there's going to be an error here. Let's try and have an index error. So 23 is actually an overstatement because we just have 0, 1, 2, 3. Do you get it? There's no index 23 here, so there's supposed to be an index error, right? So let's go ahead. So what we expect to run is just this block and then this block. So let's go ahead to run this program. So when we run the program right now, it says list index out of range. This always executes. So instead of us having the index error popping up like 4 red lines telling us index error, this index is out of range, the except basically ran, and then the finally ran. So that would be it regarding error handling. So I hope you actually learned one or two things. So I just want you to know that this isn't just all about my lists or whatever. This is just an illustration. So you can have tuples, and then you can have a lot of programs in this your try statement that you just want to keep running. And one thing I also want you guys to take note of is the indentation. These indentations are very, very important. It's not, you don't write it this way, it doesn't work this way, you're going to have an error. So you write it this way, then your except statement shouldn't be inside your trial statement, it should be aligned with your trial statement. The same thing your else and your finally. I also want to emphasize the fact that the else and the finally are not compulsory to be in your program. You can go ahead to do without them. Do you get it? And run your program, it's still going to work fine, but you can always have them because this will always execute whenever there's an error. Whenever there's no error, your else statement will execute, because you always want your program to do something whenever there is no error. Do you get it? So you put them in your else statement, and then irrespective of whether there's an error or no error, you can always put that in your final statement. So that will be it for today. So see you tomorrow. Bye.